maneuver.
So, for those of you who know and those who don't know, I played in the Wednesday, or not the Wednesday webcam, that just ended. I played in the webcam championship. Round two, the second one, 2 of 3. I don't know. They're calling it qualifiers. I don't actually know the name, but they're calling it the webcam championship. And there's only one more left. So if you want to qualify, I think the prize pool is like $3,000 for the webcam championship in December. There's one more event in which you can qualify in November. And if you haven't heard about it before, it probably doesn't matter to you, but the top 4 points getters, like people who performed but didn't qualify, also will get in. And that's kind of what I'm shooting for at this point, because I didn't do so well at the second webcam championship. I ended up, I think, 2-1, and one of those wins was a bye. So it was not a great showing for me. So one of the things I always talk about on stream is you can approach things with a learning mindset. You can always take lessons from things you do, right? And to me, it's always about the improvement, and it's kind of bittersweet when you say, like, I did my best, I didn't make mistakes, so you can't be upset, but also that doesn't feel very good, right? So, I don't record all my matches, and I don't go like play by play. I do know there are people who do that. There are people who do learn that way, and I'm not quite one of those people, but I've also never really visualized it like this before, so you'll have to bear with me a bit here. But this is kind of the process I go through with every deck I've played at every event I've played in, whether it was the webcam national championship from season 1, or a provisional, or a regional I traveled to in Pasadena. Whether I top cut it or not, this is kind of the overall categories, I guess, that I think of in my mind. So the first thing I do is I got to identify what I played, right? Make sure that I'm not recognizing the wrong things, because this did happen to me. I think I got 11th or 12th place in Pasadena playing Toga, but it was a top 8 cut. And this is the part that really helped me with Toga, because I was playing this wall-based, life unkillable sort of Toga deck, and just not really recognizing that not only are there better characters for that option and playstyle, but the ways to exploit Toga's weaknesses really don't lend themselves to just having a big staging area, right? So I really like the idea that she could find all the right foundations, and I'm generally a patient player, almost to my own detriment a lot of the time. And so when I got matched up against people with good deadlock effects and people with more proactive characters, more proactive card draw, like All Might 3 was a massive problem for me, so that one was one where I didn't identify the character properly, right? And so looking at what I played with Rodan, recognizing it was a staple of last format, so people are aware of the deck. And this is almost kind of why I played it, right? This is also kind of why I played what I played, and identifying why I played Toga that way kind of ties into it. So why I played Rodan also is I haven't gotten to play Rodan yet, and I haven't played the All Symbol in the tournament for a long time, pretty much since My Hero became a thing. Actually, I don't know if I've ever, since the very first tournament I played in, I don't know if I've played the All Symbol, actually, which is kind of sad because it's some of my favorite cards. So I wanted to play a strong All Symbol character. 7 hand size is important. Recognizing the ups and downs of being a 7-hander in this format is super duper important. He guarantees good checks. I wanted this to be a particularly casual kind of environment for me. I wasn't stressing too much about this tournament. Despite the excellent prizing, I just knew going into this weekend that I wasn't going to be in the best spirits, I guess you could say. I didn't stream the event, I didn't get super hyped up for it or anything. I slept 2 or 3 hours beforehand, which is a bad sign. I've got a whole superstition on sleeping before a tournament, so the math checks out on that one. So I wanted a character that it would be pretty simple and not leave everything up to chance. And then the other thing was I played an easy offense. There was an easy offense available to me with playing the all symbol Rodan over the void symbol. I definitely think you can argue the void symbol is not just a better symbol right now because it has like all the answers, but is a stronger Rodan deck. And those are things that we'll talk about later. But for the most part, the all symbol offers like a cheap and easy offensive strategy that I wanted to take advantage of. So all in all, I thought it would be a pretty easy, reliable deck that I can lean on the strengths of the character and do some of my favorite things on some of my favorite symbols while not having to get too intense with the interaction, right? Not too specific. You know, Rodan doesn't need a lot of specific cards to operate, right? It's not like you have to see rabble rousing like playing Bakugo, or you're not a city rampage deck that's married to specifically the cards that bonus your checks, right? So identifying the upsides and the downsides to the deck that I played specifically. So we'll start with the upsides, of course, is excellent chain blocking. I'm not worried about string decks at all. Risky encounters decks are not a massive threat to Rodan, in my opinion. That's why the Bakugo one that messes with your hand size and makes you discard cards, I think, is really good because it approaches the real issue for Risky, which isn't so much the board state. It's really the fact that it's still a 4-high move with, you know, even with stun 1, like Rodan can block with everything committed, right? So excellent chain blocking. We had Chivalrous Competitor, which is amazing into both Ruin style decks and cards like Chomp, which I really just hate getting chomped. The target for a 3-div target destroying my foundation is super rough for me. Being an old head retro player, even when we saw it on a 3-check attack, it was it was pretty rough. So people make the argument that Chomp doesn't kill you, but I don't know. I die a little inside. So defeating targeted flip. This was actually something that in the stream game I played against George Zhang, Chivalrous could have won me the game with its response flip, but I didn't check well enough at the right moments, right? I made a couple misplays and things like that, and he identified the threats pretty much perfectly. So, you know, Chivalrous Competitor kept me in that game, though, because of its ability to deny Dragon Strike, the flip response for the card that he wanted. So I had a bunch of copies of Chivalrous. They all got flipped by Dragon Strike in that matchup. They were responding to different destruction effects left and right, so Chivalrous was a big deal. Amazing Deadlock. I chose to play Dragon Strike over the other 4 diffs, and I'll talk about the attack lamp a little bit more later. But the version that I think Tam was playing at the Wednesday Webcam Weekly, I don't think it had Dragon Strikes. The version I looked at from our team streams on the grind did not have Dragon Strike, and I wanted it both for the Deadlock and for the foundation removal, right? For answering problem foundations. So I thought that the Deadlock on it was good enough, especially since a big part of my game plan, as you'll find out later as well, is the Patchwork Baby. I love the Patchwork Baby, and so if you go into Deadlock and I get 2 free momentum to fuel the keywords on Patchwork Baby, we're in a very good spot even without our combos, right? So Vast Strength is one of the only cards that interacts with the Blitz abilities. It's removing Blitz, and Blitz usually being the only attack on, or the only ability on a card when you play it as an attack, can be very strong. The keyworded cards, like, you know, the powerfuls and the EXs from Attack on Titan aren't super strong. And there's not as many people, I feel like, relying on cards like Armor of the Wolf and cards like, you know, pressing the advantage with its EX2. So there's a lot to be said about Vast Strength looking very good into an 8 difficulty attack that is now a blank 8 difficulty attack. We have excellent throw hate on this symbol. I got to play Mikasa defeats the female Titan main board, and I liked that, so I didn't get zone mixed as hard by vertical maneuvering device. I felt like that was a good answer to both the throw decks that might appear, which I don't think we've really seen, but there's some, there's random throws that end up in there. I did play against the Falling Skies deck at one point, so it did matter at one or two intervals. So Throw Hate was nice. Psychic Spirit Glass is a card that a lot of people recommend all the time as like a win con in a can, and it never seems that easy. But man, Spirit Glass is an absolute hosing if you're not ready for it. When you catch people with 3 cards in hand and 2 are the same card, they're usually an action card, and it's an absolute beating when you can name the only mid block in their hands. So I love that card a lot. Absorbed Energy Spirit Strike has a ton of synergy with vertical maneuvering equipment. It counts as the momentum hate for this deck. I knew that people were going to be playing Toga. We knew that there's going to be some decks that do rely on having momentum, so definitely got to include that. And also, it's all symbols' way to flip attacks and ruin combos. So it worked against an Echo attack for me, right? They had a Tetra Terror that became way less impressive when you can't play it a second time with more speed. So we love Absorbed Energy Spirit Strike. It's hard for me to include a 3 damage move, and this is one of the good ones. Pageant Queen, put a speed to 1. You need to have it. If you don't have Barrier Shield, right, you got to play the Pageant Queen symbols. That's just kind of how it feels. And then we had quirky card draw. So what I mean by that is Supersonic Flight is a quirky card draw card. And we don't have the best ways to activate it, but I chose to play cards like What is a Symbol, which can let me remove 2 of them from anywhere in the discard pile at a single time. And it gives me a little more damage pump and damage reduction. So I really like that card in Rodan. It's very small when you read it on face, right? But when it's a game-deciding amount of damage, it's a pretty big deal. People don't expect it when you get like 2 or 3 stacked up. You can just zero out 1 attack, and that makes it that much harder to beat Rodan. So the downsides to this deck was that it folds to 1 or 2 big attacks. If we don't see the Pageant Queen, we absolutely do just get dunked by Smiling Titan. -4 speed on turn 2 might let you block 1 attack if you built really, really good. But if Smiling Titan plays 2 attacks on you turn 2, you're getting squashed. There's going to be a point where they have EX. There's going to be a point where they have like Stun 2, which is just good enough. There's going to be a point where they unexpected outcomes and rip out your attacks, and you never get to even try to attack them. And they end up with 13 foundations to overcome your deadlock before you ever draw it. So folding to 1 or 2 big attacks is definitely a downside here. The discard pile can be tampered with. This is one I didn't think about. So this is one that I think is very important when we come back to looking at things, posthumously. I didn't think about what happens when somebody can make me mill 1 card and mess with my discard pile too much. Obviously, I thought of Deception Daggers, and my discard pile wasn't super duper important to me. I wasn't like grabbing cards out of it. But I played against 2 Endeavor 3s, and both of them played the 1-man Inferno card. And that card is just randomly really good against Rodan. And those were matchups I was not really prepared for. The All symbol compared to the Void symbol really doesn't have great ways to set up its discard pile, right? There's no Knots Flask. There's no incubating. What is a symbol is one of the closest ways I can get to it. Sugar Rush technically does a really good job, but has a really high cost. So my discard pile got tampered with in 2 out of the 4 matches that I played pretty regularly. And that one caught me off guard. Not only that I was playing against Endeavor 3 more than once in a tournament, but the fact that their ability to get 1-man Inferno out just totally ruined all of my game plans. A lot of my attacks are great block mods, which, that's kind of a risk that you run with Rodan, right? Is playing a lot of +1s. I ended up with a lot of +1s getting randomly dumped on top of my discard pile. Combo can be interrupted. Focus attack is a huge part of this deck, and one of the things I did not think about was that interrupting the Funny Punch combo by flipping the previous attacks face down, also lowers the effectiveness of Patchwork Baby because you're losing all those keywords from your card pool. So Big Fist Bash loses a target, or was it not Big Fist Bash? Although if they flip Big Fist Bash, right, like you lose the +1/+1. Was it Jumbo Big Fist? Can lose a target if your opponent identifies the correct attack to block with their absorbed energy, Spirit Strike, or their Faith Shield. They can not only ruin the focused attack combo, but they're also going to make Patrick Baby and Jumbo Fist Bash the Breaker 3/1. The one that's going to add an attack back to your hand. You can lose that target too. So that stuff was very, very annoying. It didn't happen too often to me, but when it did happen, the ramifications of losing, unique keywords that are different than Patrick Babies means I'm losing like 3 damage on that attack or something like that, right? Or if I have double Patrick Baby, that's a whole attack's worth of reach that I just lost. So that one was pretty rough. Lack of hand traps. The all symbol doesn't really come with the Genkais and the referee juries of the world. You're not going to get to surprise your opponent with too much from your hand. I mean, Evading Copy is coming out of the sideboard, which is super good, but it's not devastating, and it doesn't necessarily win you the game on the spot. And I feel like people are kind of, ready for it. It does absolutely nothing to the 8-speed attacks of the world. And it also kind of, Evading Copy specifically non-bows with vertical maneuvering equipment sometimes, so that can actually be kind of rough. So the no hand traps in a format where getting your opponent to overcommit resources is kind of a big part of the game plan, I feel. It's kind of a big... look at Risky Encounter, right? They call it risky. It's kind of on the nose because you're losing a lot of resources. But just surviving a turn where your opponent blows up 6 foundations to play 2 Risky Encounters because you had the hand trap hidden for the second one or something like that is a big deal in this format. So not having that was something I was aware of, but I didn't worry too much. I relied on the strength of Rodan a lot. And then this version gained very little from Attack on Titan, meaning, there's not a lot of spice that people are going to be worried about. There's not a lot of guesswork. That goes back to being kind of a format of the last staple. Listen to me. A staple of the last format. People were kind of aware of what the deck's doing. The all symbol and the void symbol both were topping. I mean, technically the air symbol top too, but can't give Justin his flowers yet. So, I think people were definitely aware of what my deck was trying to do, and not having any guesswork didn't help me. Whereas almost every deck I played against, I was very, except for Ryukyu, I was very much trying to figure out what their game plan was. So that definitely helped out my opponents a lot against me. So then this is what I tried to do different. So I definitely took someone else's framework, and I tried to kind of make it my own, right? I tried to play a faster or greedier play style. Going into webcam, I knew that I didn't want to get into these stalling out games where I know I can never die, but I'm not sure if I'm ever going to be able to kill my opponent. That's just not something I wanted to leave on the table. It ended up happening anyways, which was super duper frustrating, but I did want to try and play a faster, more aggressive play style for Rodan. I wanted to favor a natural consistency over extra card draw with an inflated deck size. Because I'm trying to play a faster game plan and a faster style, worrying about milling out because of removing all my cards is something that I shouldn't have to worry about as much. We're going to force the issue, hopefully, and try to, make something happen. And if we fail and we die because of it, we lose because of it, then oh well, right? We tried our best. But for the most part, I took out multiple bites from my deck. I didn't want a card that's just drawing me a card because I'm not trying to extend the game any longer. I'm trying to play cards with better statistical values and I'm trying to play cards that increase my consistency in other ways. So, for example, instead of playing 2 Jumbo Fist Bash, I played 3 Jumbo Fist Bash because I figured I'd rather play that card and draw an attack from my card pool more often than I want to draw a card off the top of my deck with multiple bites. So that reasoning and that logic made me think that I could play a smaller deck size, and I just didn't trim the ratios quite as well. I figured I went down from like 67 or 66 to like 64 cards, and I took out 1 attack, and it wasn't enough. It was very weird. But the math did not end up favoring me. Easier access to answering problem foundations. So, again, instead of playing multiple bites, I was playing Dragon Strikes, where the increased difficulty came back to bite me a bit, but I wanted easier access to answer problem foundations to end games quicker. So, I figure if I have 1 targeted flip effect and it's early in the game, my opponent might only have 1 problem foundation, so it'll make it easier to end games quicker. And then I wanted to combine What is a Symbol with Supersonic Flight for explosive draw power and damage control. I talked about this one a bit more. I haven't seen any Rodans packing it. It was very good for me. What is a Symbol performed very, very well for me when it came up. It forced blocks in places that my opponents really shouldn't have blocked or have needed to. It let me ignore an attack or 2 or not have to respond to an attack that maybe has a block punishment element to it. So I loved that element of it. Being able to remove Supersonic Flight from anywhere in my discard pile was huge. So of all the things I tried to do different, I think this is the one that probably paid off the best. My goals for the event. So I talk about this a lot, and it's always something I talk about after the fact for the event. But top 4 to qualify for the championship and win the event are obviously goals. Everyone's playing in tournaments to win the tournament. Even if you don't think you're going to win the tournament and you don't have any aspirations to or whatever, that's still your goal. Your goal is still to win games, right? So that's obviously going to be up there. My goals were to not go to time, was to try to play 3 games, play a faster version of Rodan, and it didn't really happen, There was a lot of points where I felt like if I tried to make things go faster, it would only make things go longer. When you play 2 attacks and they're not good and they're not going to deal damage, and it's very unlikely that your opponent doesn't just block them and get better review steps out of it, you're extending the game, at least on your end, because you're not sculpting a better hand. So there's a lot of games where both me and my opponent were trying to sculpt better hands. And especially a lot of turns where I would open up by checking poorly and looking at the top 2 cards and seeing only attacks, and then realizing I have no way to deal with them because I'm not playing on multiple bites. I'm playing something else. And not having enough card draw from my stage maybe, or it's too early in the game. Settling Old Debts isn't online yet because I'm trying to do things turn 2 and be a little bit faster. So looking at the 2 3s on top of my deck and going, well, there's no way I can force the issue now, and having to pivot. So ended up going to time a lot more than I wanted to. And I think aside from a single 2-0, I don't think I finished 3 games in a single round. And then I always have like a goal for the deck, right? I always have something that I want to achieve. One of the things I wanted to achieve when I played Denki 1 was to build all 3 sports festival stadiums in 1 turn, which I did manage to do. I didn't activate the 3rd one. My opponent couldn't block anymore, but I did do that, right? When I played Asui 2, my goal was to win 1 match. I did not do that. I did not accomplish that. I think my other goal was to play Prominence Burn into Prominence Burn. Something like that, like some combo in the deck. I just want to pull off one situation. I've definitely had burn someone when playing Toga, use a burn effect to get a victory. And for this tournament, I wanted to land a Patrick Baby after a focus attack, pretty much for game. I don't think it counts if I don't win the game. If I just deal 7 damage with a Patrick Baby and call it a day, that's not a goal. So really, it's win the game with a Patrick baby, like on an 8, on a 9, whatever it has to be, and just have it be like my opponent believe that they've survived the nastiest attack, but actually it's Patrick baby. So that was my goal. I did not accomplish this goal. All my Patrick babies had to come earlier in the turns. The stun was too valuable as an opener. Too many of my attacks shared the same keyword. So one of the things that I don't know how much of an impact it would have really ever had, because I can't remember leaving someone at like 1 damage, or being like 1 off or 2 damage off. But it's worth mentioning that Multiple Bites has a different keyword than Dragon Strike, and Dragon Strike has 2 of the same keywords as Patrick Baby. So Dragon Strike into Patrick Baby, not as good of an opener as it might be for other versions of the deck. And that's something I kind of learned, that a 5 damage Patrick Baby is just not that cool. I think even on commentary, Tam Cardwell was very surprised that I had a Patrick Baby with like 3 attacks in the card pool or something, and it was about as low of damage as it could be. So that was my goal for the event, and we did not accomplish it. But where it all went wrong. Without incubating, it was difficult to meet the 4 attack threshold. To get to that threshold early on in the game, for me to actually play at the speed that I wanted to, I had to buff my rivals' attacks with cards like Floating Around My Babies on their turn, to not mess up my own discard pile for my own turns, and also to just get more attacks out of the way. But that was not a great game plan, and it very much limited my ability to accelerate through bad checks. I needed more permanent answers to assets. So going back to the being greedier and wanting to play a faster game plan, my idea was I can play pass-through walls instead of Hacker Extraordinaire. One of the reasons being that I'm not generating momentum too quickly. My momentum game plans are mostly for late game and for defense with vertical maneuvering equipment. I'm getting momentum defensively and with Deadlock, right? So I'm not ramping momentum to spend on Hacker. And also, it's another 4 check, and I thought if I have the 6 check that I can stack on top of my deck, it'll allow me to play that more aggressive play style. It also still answers an asset, in an ephemeral way, but that ended up not being enough. In fact, I don't think I ever got to use pass-through walls to cancel anything other than a breaker off of a Twisty Surroundings, which is kind of ironic because you can use either version of the ability to do so. I forgot to cancel the response on Twisty during a game, but then I canceled a breaker and it was kind of the same thing. But I thought that was pretty funny. Pass-through walls, not as good for Rodan. Hacker being another 4 block mod is probably more important than the 6 check, which is difficult to evaluate. And maybe there's a world where we're playing 70 plus cards and we play both. But I wanted faster checks, I wanted answers to breaker, and I wanted, a momentumless answer to an asset. Because, as we saw in my stream match, even through multiple Chivalrous, Dragon Strike was able to eventually flip my pass-through walls before I ever got to use it anyways. So, I bought multiple turns to keep my answer in play, but if it had been a Hacker, right, we could have flipped both of the vertical maneuvering equipments. So that was something that I probably should have considered, at least in the sideboard. Just to realize, I think if I had sideboarded the Hackers, I probably would have sided them in every game after round 1. Like every single game after the first game, I'd be siding them. So I had no ramp or check bonuses to compensate for counterplay. All I had was more counterplay to breaker, right? Like I had the pass-through walls, but if my opponent's stuffing my card pool, if my opponent was hacking my checks, if my opponent was committing my foundations, there was just nothing I really had going on. I had no ability to extend over what my actual checks gave me. And I thought that the Rodan enhanced commit would save me from checking too poorly, but it turns out that sometimes you still just need to check a 7 when there's a 5 on top of your deck. It's always good to have foundation readying available to you, foundation building in the middle of a turn. So that's something that the Rodan decks have never really been great at. They've been really good at getting all that extra card draw and just building out wider. And that was something that I didn't want to do with this deck's strategy. But it is how Rodans have been compensating for that in the past, right? It's just ramp card draw and then build more organically. And then I saw only attacks with Rodan enhanced many times. I mentioned that a couple of times now, where I don't know if I had to shuffle better. I don't know if I needed a better ratio. I thought I did a great job shuffling my deck. I shuffled it so many times, so many ways. But there was just so many times that, especially if I was only looking at the top 2, it was just 2 attacks. And I would draw 1 and then have to check 1. Against George, I had to play an extra attack, and I missed out on some stats or something because I had to draw the last card of my deck, because the last card of my deck was an attack, and I could not pass the focused attack if I check a 3 there. And then I cycled and I shuffled and I got a brand new deck, and then I checked a 3 anyways. So that was super duper rough. I mean, it was very funny when it happened to Jiro players, so I'm not going to act like it's not funny to happen to a Rodan player, but it feels pretty bad. Even having something like just a mill 1 off the top of my own deck would have been surprisingly useful. Though I don't think I could play the Endeavor card with a straight face. I don't remember what it's called, but it's just mill 1 for 1 damage. The cards, anyways. Let's move on. So what to do moving forward now that we've identified what went wrong? Number 1 overall, every event is a clean slate. It does not matter what you did in the past event, even if it's a points-based thing like the Webcam Championship and there's a league element. You can just top 4 and qualify, right? You can just win the event and qualify for nationals or for worlds. So every event is a clean slate. Your goals might get harder. The finish line might be further away, but every event is a clean slate. It does not matter the mistakes you made in the past. You can always just do better. For webcam events, let's play a deck that can force an issue. Rodan, even when trying to play him more aggressively, did not do good enough of a job. And I don't think it's a surprise that Toga did so well at the event and ended up winning it all. It doesn't involve too many new cards either, but it involves a game plan where you can reduce interaction. If your opponent has all of their cards committed and none of them are playable while committed, you don't have to wait as long for them to play their enhances. So, decks that can force the issue and say, I might win, I might not, but it's not going to take a full hour to play one game is a big deal. And while I tried my play style to fit that narrative, the deck I played did not. Shuffle better. I can maybe just shuffle better and not have attacks on top of my deck. I can also practice more and realize that maybe my ratios aren't as good as I thought they were. This is a deck I pivoted to at the very last minute. My locals are very good at helping me get the cards at like 6 a.m. in the morning, and I'm very appreciative of that. And I wish I had done better because of that. But, this is a deck I kind of hopped onto at the very, very last minute. Played it like once or twice and made some changes, and I can't expect to do well when practicing that way. So I didn't exactly have the highest expectations given my preparation, but if I had practiced more, maybe I would have landed on this deck sooner. Work on covering my weaknesses rather than trying to exploit rival weaknesses. So going back to like the one-man Inferno example, where my opponent milling me one card kind of ruined me. There's also a dual needle lunge deck at the event, right? So Rodan looks at the top 2, and then you flip dual needle lunge or any other momentum, make them mill 2, and then they have no information. Those are things that I could do better at. I wasn't expecting the Endeavor decks to still be hanging around, to be honest. I would have thought people would have kind of moved on, but people play what they like, they play what they know, and they play what they own. So if they already have like a really sick Endeavor deck and they like playing it, they're probably just going to play that. Um, so I did not expect the one man Inferno sauce. I played against two Endeavor decks that both played it, of course, and it ruined me pretty consistently. So if I can find better ways, and that might mean changing symbols, that might mean, moving to an incubating symbol, and so I can kind of craft my discard pile a little bit better. But yeah, covering up my weaknesses rather than trying to play the metagame, I think will give me a better deck in the future. Dodge the George Zhang matchup. This is a really, really important one. Don't play against good players. I've lost to George, I think, twice now on stream. He's always playing an amazing deck that has lots of card draw and lots of blocking potential. And like I was talking about how my offense was cheap and easy. I was trying to exploit people's willingness to play decks like Toga and Endeavor for the most part. And, I was willing to exploit the Smiling Titans of the world and feel like I can block just enough of their attacks and, punish them with big, high damaged focused attacks and things like that. But, sometimes it's bracketology. Sometimes it's a bad character matchup. Sometimes they build two vertical maneuvering equipment and you're a dumbass who didn't play the real asset hate. And if you're watching my stream before this video, I was talking about, like, I'm not an unlucky person. Like, George made a mistake at one point that I didn't catch. I didn't even really catch it myself until he had played his next card. And he'd committed, like, everything except the Incredible display. And I was like, oh, yeah, it'd be like that sometimes. Because I totally got away with responding to partial block with a true 100%. That could have been canceled. So it's not even like I was a particularly unlucky person, right? I'm not. And I told him after they told us we were at time, I was like, I don't think I win this. So you gotta dodge the best players sometimes if you want to get through. Not an unlucky person. Understatement. I don't know what you're talking about, man. And the last thing I could do is trust the wisdom of others. I could trust that people have been working on the deck a lot more than I have, have covered those weaknesses for me. One of the things I do a lot is I'll make a rough draft of a deck for my own ideas, and I'll go and, compare it to someone else's, like, more experienced build. And I notice there's all these cards I want to play, right? And I look at the cards that I don't like from their list. But the cards that I don't like from their list, there's almost always something that the deck needs. It's asset hate, it's low blocks, it's a one difficulty foundation where you need it, whatever it is. It's a deadlock threat when you don't have any deadlock somewhere else. There's a lot of instances like that. And so for Rodan, the number one issues that I hadn't covered was low blocks. I didn't like where my low blocks were at. And so I had to, like, max out on Chivalrous and play Resting Up. And a lot of the cards I didn't like from other people's lists, I noticed just happened to be low blocks. And so they were, like, the best low blocks when I went to the list of low blocks. So all I'm really saying is there's a lot of reasons why a list might be different. And when you compare it to your ideas, try to find those differences and see if it really is just covering a weakness that your deck might have. Trusting the wisdom of others probably would have got me a lot further in this tournament than trying to play the sort of haphazard, rush together, faster, so to speak, list. But at the same time, if I hadn't tried to make the deck perform a bit faster, it's probably not one I would have chosen for a webcam event in the first place. So, all in all, I'm not super disappointed with my performance at the event. I definitely would have preferred to make top 4 and not even have to play in the next webcam championship event. But I know that I learned a lot about the format. I recognized, I guess sort of truths I already knew, right? I realized why some of the cards that we play are as important as they are, and the fact that most importantly, people are taking the webcam championship pretty seriously. You know, I was surprised to fight against Endeavors, but you know they were pretty highly tuned decks, and they were like good. And I also played another Rodan. That's the craziest part. Was my matchups were like Ryukyu, which I felt ready for, but ended up not quite being ready for. Not expecting Ryukyu to have as good of a long game, right? But that's probably player dependent. And then I played two Endeavors, which threw me off guard pretty bad, but I felt like I had a good matchup for it. I just, you know, I didn't have answers for their answers a lot of the time. But, and then I played a Rodan who had a really cool Void list that had a lot of air attuned cards. So it was playing like Whirling Slash and stuff. And I definitely made a bad read because I hadn't played against Death from Above very often. And I didn't think they were playing 4 Death from Above. And I 1000% got killed by the 4th Death from Above. And so I learned a lot there too. Definitely choked on that one and could have walked away with probably another win or at least another tie, right? But I definitely choked the game away there. So I can identify the mistakes that I made so I don't feel hopeless or helpless in the situation. And I know how we can repair those mistakes. I know how we can overcome them. So going into the next event, all I have to do is hope that they don't have like a massive banner errata list and there's not like a challenger deck that totally shakes up the format. And then I feel totally prepared. I mean, how many products can come out between now and, what is it, like November 10th is the next event? It can't be that many, right? Anyhow, I hope that this helped you guys out a bit. If you're watching this on YouTube, please drop a like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you're watching on Twitch, it's September. I'm just saying. But that's how I kind of go through and I look back at, you know, my tournament runs, what I could have done better, why my deck does what it does, why it performed the way it did, and, you know, what are the things that kind of beat up on it. That is to say that you should sign up for the next webcam championship because it is your last opportunity to get qualified to play for $3,000 down in December. One of the biggest cash prizes we've ever had for this game. So it's going to be a big, big deal. And I hope to see you all there. Anyways, peace out, guys. I'll see you in the next video.